One of the things that makes Buffalo special is the cold and the ice. And ice allows us to keep things cold. And before the development of refrigeration, there was the ice industry, where people would come down and do what was called ice harvesting. Every year, once the ice froze, thousands of men would venture out onto the ice, and they would saw through the ice, sometimes between 4 inches thick and up to a foot and a half thick. They'd saw it into pieces and drag the ice cakes down a channel and into shore. And at that point, they would put them into these huge things called icehouses. And every year, those workers will go out all day to work out on the ice pack to bring that in. And that ice was often put into, well, basements or cellars or storage areas underground where the ice would keep cold all the way into summer. This was especially useful for the breweries who didn't have refrigeration back then. And they would buy up tons of these ice cakes and store them in their lagering cellars, or as they were called, beer caves.
In 2005, I had the chance to go down inside what was called a beer cave. It was at the old German-American Brewing Company at Main and High Street. Once we got inside, we had to basically skitter and slide down piles of debris to get into the lower basements where the ice used to be kept. They reminded me of the old rathskellers you would see in Europe. It was amazing. You could see the ceilings and the square holes that went up to ground level so that you could drop blocks of ice down inside to the basements. It was cool. There were even pulleys mounted into the ceilings to move the heavy kegs around. This was a critical industry for the brewers here in Buffalo. And it was an industry that relied in a large part on the ice industry. Additionally, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals that wandered out onto the ice to go ice fishing. They would drag with them huts and dogs and their families. This was the only way for many of them to get their own food for dinner. And coming along with all of this ice was danger. The danger of getting trapped out on the ice or falling through the ice.
And every year, of course, there were people that would get stranded, sometimes miles out on the ice, sometimes 1 to 2 days walk. And a storm would come in and break up the ice pack, and the ice would drift out, and they weren't able to get back to shore. There are newspaper accounts of sometimes as many as 500 people trapped on ice floes out here. It's crazy. I mean, to think about it now. There were even taverns that were out on the ice, sometimes out past the horizon, where fishermen and ice harvesting workers could go have a drink, get warm for a little while. And these taverns that were out there, sometimes 4 miles out, were made of wood and were towed out either by man or by horse. And one of the things you got to imagine, though, is when you're out on these lakes, there are what's called pressure ridges that build up. And a pressure ridge is where you get a wall of ice, where an ice shove hits another ice front, and it creates mountains that are sometimes so high that you can't see shore from the other side of them. And of course, every year, people would get stranded out there.
Before the invention of helicopters, the only way to rescue people off the ice was to hike out there yourself or take teams of dog sleds and go out. Often, they had to effect these rescues in blinding snowstorms.
But eventually, with the invention of refrigeration, industries like ice harvesting faded into history and are now all but forgotten.